Marks, Chair of the Connectivity Committee meeting. I got to work on that name. I'd like to welcome everyone. First item on our agenda today is approval of our agenda. Perhaps first we disclose your pecuniary interest. So if anyone has one, maybe they can nod or wiggle. I'm not seeing any, so we'll assume there's no disclosures. Next item is adoption of our meeting for today. Are there any additions? Are everyone fine with it?
I'm good.
Okay. We have a regret from Sean, who's work related, and he's going to try and join us later. And unfortunately, Joshua, I should say, has lost his mother in Uganda. So our thoughts are with him. Kind of a sad occasion. I guess we need a motion for adopting the minutes.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Moved by Dave Mennel. Seconder, please. Okay, that's Justin.
Mike.
Thank you. Mike, oh, sorry. Don't recognize voices yet. Thank you for that. Any questions? I'll call for the vote, please.
Councillor Marks.
Yes.
Councillor Giguère.
Yes.
Justin Pennings.
Yes.
Mike Andrews.
Yes.
Warden Manel.
Yes.
5-0, the motion is carried.
Okay, thank you for that. Next item is a SWIFT update. And Barry, you're on the call?
I am. Can you hear me?
We can. And special welcome to you. Glad to have you.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
All right,
I'm just
go
going to figure out how to share my screen here. And once I do that, we should be good to go. Can you see this presentation here?
Yes.
Perfect.
I can.
All right. Perfect. First of all, a little bit about the SWIFT project and the approach we take to procurement and kind of some of the results we expect to receive here. So first and foremost, the way we approach the procurement is not to be prescriptive on where the ISPs are allowed to build. We think we get the best results when we allow the ISPs to build in areas that complement their existing infrastructure. So rather than saying, you've got to build on the west end of the county, maybe all of the ISP infrastructure is over here and it's very difficult to get there, and we don't get the results that we had hoped for. What we do is we actually tell them where they can't build. So you'll see here these areas in blue represent SWIFT's assessment of the served areas within Elgin County. We've collected this information from a couple of different sources, from the ISPs themselves, and then in collaboration with feedback we get from residents in the area, we will adjust the served area accordingly. We do get feedback from residents saying, "Hey, listen, you've got me marked as served, but I'm not really served." We'll look into it, and either we'll get back to the resident, letting them know who serves that area, or we'll take it off if we find that's the case, that it isn't actually served. So and again, these. By served, I mean 50-10 service. So it's 50 megabits of download speed and 10 megabits of upload speed. That's the universal service objective that's been set by the CRTC, and it's the target for the fund that we're under. So we'll fund projects that can provide at least 50-10 service, but we won't fund projects in areas that already have 50-10 service. So ultimately, the ISPs decide where they want to propose. I mean, they're providing at least 1/3 of the funding, so they have to be in areas that make good business sense to them. Having said that, we don't want them to take the low-hanging fruit. We don't just want them to propose projects that they would do anyway. So we do have a bit of a litmus test that says if we deem the project would have had a 7-year or less payback without subsidy, we're not going to fund it. We think the ISPs are going to do that eventually on their own anyway, so we don't want to fund that. Once we receive all of the proposals, we have an evaluation committee that looks through those proposals based on the evaluation criteria that's set out in the RFP, and then we make a decision. And ultimately, once that happens, I take that to a committee on my board called the Procurement Advisory Committee. They approve the procurement, and then we come back to the county and let you guys know what the results are. Important to note that the funding is really focused on access to end users. There used to be something in the SWIFT program called Netco. We've abandoned that. The whole Netco thing was focused on getting backhaul capacity to Toronto. In talking to the ISPs, nobody really has trouble getting to Toronto. It's getting out to the customers that is the expensive piece here. And so we've kind of made a little bit of a left-hand turn with SWIFT in the last year or so, and we're really focusing on getting service out to the areas that need it. By the way, any questions along the way, I'm more than happy to answer them as we go, so feel free to speak up. A little bit about the technology. So I did note that, we're focused on 5010 service here. We're funded under a program called the Small Communities Fund, and they don't really care about technology. They care about service at the end of the day. And again, they've kind of tied their program to the universal service objective of 5010. So really what that says is that we need to be open to funding technologies that will satisfy that requirement. So we kind of describe ourselves as being technology agnostic here. So we'll fund fiber to the home technologies, hybrid fiber coaxial, which is kind of fiber to the node, and then your typical coax technology into your house, digital subscriber line, which is effectively the same thing through your telephone line rather than the cable, and then of course wireless broadband. We do give preference, though, to what we call scalable technologies. So any technology that can deliver services beyond 5010 all the way up to 1 gig symmetrical, you get full points if you can get up to that 1 gig, which really says, we do like fiber, but we're open to any technology that will provide 5010 service. We do accept wireless proposals, and we have awarded, so far in the other counties, we have awarded a handful of wireless contracts, if you will. But we do have a very high standard for wireless. We look in a lot of detail at the design, and it's got to be what we call a responsible design. There are wireless providers out there that will put up a tower. They'll engineer it for, let's say, 200 customers, but they'll actually put 500 customers on it, right? We don't let them do that. We have a couple criteria. First of all, if they're going to propose a wireless solution, they need to show us through their detailed engineering that they've engineered the network to be able to give 5010 service, not up to, but 5010 service or better to 90% of the residents within that, the footprint of that tower, if you will. Typically, they like to engineer to between 20 and 30%. And if they sell more than that, it's kind of gravy for them. But the problem is when they oversubscribe like that, everybody gets less and less and less. And the more people you put on the tower, you get less and less and less, down to the point in some cases where it's difficult to actually use it. So we do have a very, very high standard for the wireless providers. We think that wireless has a part to play in Southwestern Ontario, but it's got to be designed responsibly. A little bit about the status of the project in Elgin County. So we did issue an RFP for Elgin on the 23rd of March. That is still currently open. It's scheduled to close on the 27th of November. We have been getting some requests from ISPs to push our current schedule out by a few weeks. As we get towards the end of the year, there's a lot of them that come due all within a couple of weeks of each other. So that may move. I don't know yet. We're still looking at it. It may move by a couple of weeks, but it won't move substantially. There's $4.1 million worth of available funding. So that is the provincial and the federal contribution together equals $4.1 million. We take proposals for any of those areas that we deem as eligible. They can bid on any of these areas. It doesn't have to be a specific section or, you know, a specific part of the county. Any area that we deem as eligible is eligible for their proposal. And the ISPs must contribute at least 1/3 of the eligible project costs. So in this case, it's a minimum of $2.05 million. So you add those up, you can expect to get about $6.15 million worth of project at a minimum. Now, what we've found in most of the other counties, not all of them, but most of them, through the competitive nature of the procurement, this number actually goes up, right? So it becomes very clear to the ISPs that the more they contribute to the project, so if they don't need a full 2/3 funding to make the project a viable project for them, they're encouraged not to ask for it. If they only need 50%, they only ask for 50%, they become more competitive through the procurement model, through the evaluation model, and effectively we get more money into the project. So we could expect this to be a minimum of 6.15 million. It could go up from there, 7 million, 8 million potentially, depending on how competitive the ISPs are and really how many of them participate in the procurement. So again, it's in the procurement phase right now. There's not a lot I can say about any, you know, potential results. I don't even have access to any bid that comes in early until the 27th of November anyway. So we kind of open it up on the 27th of November, and that's our first glimpse at what the results might look like. After that, our evaluation team takes a few weeks to do the evaluation. There's usually a lot of back and forth with the ISPs clarifying information and data. And then we target 3 weeks after that to have awarded contracts, negotiated contracts with the ISPs, and you know, and then at that point we'll come back to the county and give the results. Now Christmas is in there, so you might want to add a week or so to that, but I would expect sometime mid to end of January, really, that we've started talking about results. Now it's important to note that we can't say anything until the province does. So if they decide they want to wait a few weeks, that's their prerogative, but they get to announce the results before we can talk in detail about them to anybody. I will come back to the warden, to the SWIFT representative on our board, and to the CAO once we've signed those contracts, and I'll let you know what the results are. Again, noting that those are confidential until the province announces. So bottom line, sometime in January, we can expect to have that information available. The targeted outcomes, as I mentioned, we're looking at least a $6.1 million project. And then from there, we kind of estimate what we might get out of that as far as actual network. So these are not hard numbers by any stretch of the imagination. It could be more, it could be a bit less, depending on the areas that the ISPs bid in, the density of the population in those areas, et cetera. But we can expect to see about 1,400 premises passed and about 85 kilometers of fiber. The construction would need to be completed between 2021 and 2023. There is a cutoff date on the Small Communities Fund. And effectively, when you back that up, it says that construction needs to be done no later than June 30th, 2023. What we've seen so far is most ISPs are trying to get as much construction in 2021 as possible. With the remainder going into 2022, we haven't had a single project or a single proposal come in suggesting 2023 yet. So we hope it stays that way. Sooner is better, of course. When we look at the multiplier on Elgin's contribution, the Elgin contribution, it's a bit convoluted, but at the end of the day, it's $271,000. There was a bigger contribution. We will be paying some of that back. So we look at the net contribution of $271,000, and you get about a 22.5 times multiplier on that investment. So that's a minimum number. Again, you'll get at least a $6.1 million project. So it's 22.5 times multiplier on the 271. As this number goes up, as the 6.1 million goes up, that multiplier will go up as well. It's important to note, though, I mentioned we're targeting somewhere around 1,400 premises. It's not going to solve the problem in Elgin County. 85 kilometers is not going to solve the problem that I showed here, right? There's way more than 85 kilometers of underserved roads here. So, we're hoping to solve about 24% of the problem, the premises, but there's still, quite a bit left over once we're done that. So if you look at the raw numbers, there's about 23,050 kilometers of roadway in Elgin County. Of those, 1,852 are underserved. So about 79-80% of the roadway is underserved in the county. Premises, you've got about 20,500. We've estimated about 6,000 of those are underserved. This project's going to address 1,400 of those. So it's about 25% that we'll actually address. We're not going to address the entire problem. We'll get into some other funding mechanisms and other ideas that are available a little bit later. But what this really shows us is there's about 3.3 premises per kilometer in the underserved areas. That's an extremely low density. ISPs are not interested in spending their money to put in, it costs on average, it costs about $65,000 to put in a kilometer of fiber. If you're only getting 3.3 premises passed, you're not going to get all of those customers subscribing to your service, right? Even if you get a 60% penetration rate, you're getting about 2 customers per kilometer. That's a very, very low rate for an ISP. They want to build in downtown Toronto where there's 2,000 per kilometer and things like this, right? So this just goes to show why we need subsidy in rural southwestern Ontario. The premise count, the density of population is just so low that if it's not subsidized, it's not going to happen on its own. WISP, so the wireless ISPs, they will target some of these areas. They'll throw up towers, but again, the service, to some premises is good, but overall it's typically very spotty, it's unreliable, and they oversubscribe their service. I know wireless providers will come and say, we've got the solution for you. We put up a couple of towers in Elgin County, problem solved. The evidence doesn't support that at all. It does have a place to play. Swift kind of thinks that the wireless providers are best suited to fix like the last 5% of the problem, if you will, right? If we could get 95% of the problem solved through fiber, we'd be more than happy to solve the other 5% with wireless. So what will Swift address? Oops, sorry. Again, we'll get about 1,400 of those 6,000 premises that are currently underserved. So we'll get about 24% of the road meters. So we get 85 kilometers out of 1,800. That's only 5% of the road kilometers, the underserved road kilometers. So again, what that shows you is there's a very low density of population in what is remaining after this version of Swift is complete. There'll still be 4.6 thousand premises and 1,800 kilometers of roadway underserved. So there's still a lot of work to be done. We know that. We don't think that this phase of Swift is going to solve the entire problem in Elgin or in any other county. There will still be work needed after we're done here. So what are some opportunities to make that happen? So there are a couple of things within the SWIFT program and outside of the SWIFT program that we can talk about. One is what we call SWIFT Plus funding, and that breaks down into really two categories here. One is what we call residual projects. So in many counties, we may get in Elgin, we may get $20 million worth of funding requests. We've only got $6 million to actually award. So it could be that there's these residual projects. They're good projects. If we had the money, we would have funded them, but we don't have the money, so we can't fund them. When that happens, we're going to come back to the county and say, hey, listen, we've got these 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever the case may be. We've got these proposals. They're really good proposals. If the county has any money, we'll give you the details. It depending on the proposal will depend on how much funding would be required. But we'll let you know that they're there, that they've gone through the procurement process. And if the county wants to divvy up some money to make those happen, it's certainly something that we would help facilitate. The other thing we can do as part of that SWIFT Plus program, as an example, we're doing this in Oxford County right now, is we'll actually run a second procurement, a SWIFT Plus procurement with any monies that the county may have. And unlike the SWIFT, the current SWIFT, the regular SWIFT program, where we kind of say, this is how the program's structured, this is how we're going to target areas in that, the municipality would have much more say because it's 100% your money. If you told me, listen, we want the procurement just to be down in the West End here, then we could make the procurement in the West End. If you wanted to target economic development opportunities and didn't want to open it up to all of the areas, we could certainly do that. And so there is that opportunity to run a procurement on behalf of Elgin. Again, you would have say as to whether you wanted to do that, how much you wanted to do that for, and what conditions you would put on that. So those are the two opportunities within SWIFT. There are other broadband funds out there, though. First and foremost is the CRTC Broadband Fund. That's a $750 million fund. I think it's over 5 years. Don't quote me on that. It's currently closed, though. All of the applications that they will accept have gone in. I believe that Bell may have applied for some CRTC funding within Elgin. I don't have visibility to that program, so I don't know what exactly went in Elgin and what didn't. But I do believe that Bell did ask for some support from the county to put those bids in, some written support, that is. There's also the ISED, so Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada has the Universal Broadband Fund that's about $1.7 billion. Again, that's over a number of years. That's not $1.7 billion up front. And that is supposed to be opening soon. They've been saying that since March, so I don't know exactly when that's coming, but it is coming. They've kind of reiterated that recently that the UBF will be opening up soon. So we look forward to seeing that. There has been an activity within the Western Ontario Wardens Caucus where we've gone out and asked for support to send letters of support to both the CRTC and to ISED, asking that they provide at least 10% of their awards to Southwestern Ontario. So if you look at the numbers, we make up about 10% of the population of Canada. These are national programs, so we would expect that they award at least 10% of that funding within our area. That may seem like a no-brainer, but if you look back at the Connect to Innovate program that was recently run by ISED, we got nothing. We got $0 awarded in Southwestern Ontario, and we don't think that's appropriate. 10% of the population, 10% of the money seems fair to me. The other program, of course, that's open right now is the Ontario Icon program. It's a $150 million program. They're currently accepting applications. I have my doubts as to whether or not this program is really going to benefit rural areas in any part of Ontario. The reason being, it's only a 25% subsidy. all of these other programs, the SWIFT program, of course, is 2/3 subsidy or up to 2/3. The Universal Broadband Fund, or sorry, the CRTC fund will actually, they don't put a limit on it. So in theory, they could fund up to 100% of a project. I believe the UBF is going to be the same, but again, that program hasn't been released yet, so I can't say for certain. The ICON program is only a 25% subsidy, so you can imagine as the proposed project goes into areas with less density of population, they actually need more subsidy to make a business case out of that. So this 25% probably isn't going to get too far outside of rural and kind of urban and suburban areas. I don't think it's going to get many applications or many successful applications that are deep rural. Having said that, they have put a bit of a disclaimer on here saying we will fund 25%, but we will also make our funding contingent upon these funds up here. So if you get 25 from us and you get 50 from these, then maybe you've got a plan. It's a bit of cat and mouse here, but it could work if a given project applies to both funds and they get awarded from both funds. It is possible that they work. The reason I talk about these is I really encourage all municipalities to pick up the phone, call the ISPs that work in your area, and make sure that they're applying to these funds. The funds are out there. We're not going to get the money if we don't have applications that go in. Make sure that the ISPs are applying to them, provide letters of support, anything the municipality can do to support these programs is beneficial. This ICON program actually won't accept any applications that don't have some sort of council support from the municipality. So it's important that you're actually supporting these programs. Now, having said that, when an ISP wants to put in an application, I think you're well within your rights to understand what the proposed solution is and how it's going to benefit the community, right? There have been a number of cases in other municipalities where the ISP has asked for support, but they were reluctant to provide the municipality with any details on what their application actually was, right? So we had to kind of sit down with them and convince them that if they wanted the letter of support, they needed to be a little bit more forthcoming, if you will. But not only encourage them, I think you should be picking up the phone and asking them if they're not applying to these funds, why not, right? It's free money that's out there for them. There's a little bit of work to do to apply. And if we don't apply, we're not going to get the funding, full stop. That's all I've got as far as the presentation goes. I'm not sure if there's any questions on this that anybody wants me to address.
Thank you, Barry. I'll open it to questions to Barry. I have one, Barry. The list of ISPs in Elgin, do we have that readily available? I guess that question to staff.
Yeah, I can get that to you. I do have it, so I can get it to you. And what I'll give you too is those that they may not be in Elgin now, but they're in surrounding areas and they could be interested in going into Elgin. So it doesn't hurt to give them a call either.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Further questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
When we're talking about Southwestern Ontario representing 10% of the population, are we talking about 10% of the underserved population or the total population?
We're talking total population. But it's not too far off when you look at underserved either, because obviously, a lot of Canada's population is eaten up in the big cities and that, right? So it's not too far off.
Okay, further questions? All right. Appreciate it very much, Barry.
No problem.
I'll
Happy to be here.
be on film with you again tomorrow at our SWIFT meeting. So
Absolutely.
thank you for your attendance today.
No problem. If you have any questions, you know how to reach me.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right. Good day.
Okay, appreciate that. Moving on, next item is reviewing our action plan. I've got a copy here. This is from our last brainstorming session with Jennifer, I believe. Julie, are you going to lead on this, or?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thought perhaps this is something we could do jointly. So working with the facilitator last meeting, the committee came up with a number of actions and another bucket of what do we want to know. And then what was outstanding from that facilitated meeting was how we will do it. So for the purposes of discussion and to engage committee members in establishing what those next steps are associated with the actions, staff have gone ahead and populated this how column and provided some suggestions for the committee's review. So specifically, one of the actions was to conduct a literature review to identify what other rural communities have done to address connectivity challenges and issues. And staff are suggesting that this is undertaken by using some expert resources that we have on our team in community and cultural services, most notably reference librarians who could help pull together this information for the committee's review. We project that this would take 2 weeks to conduct the preliminary research, and then we suggest 2 weeks for analysis after that. And we also think that this work would be ongoing. So if anyone is doing exciting projects, we would certainly bring that information back to the committee. So with that suggestion there noted, through you, Mr. Chairman, I'd ask whether any committee members have any suggestions for changes, or whether there's kind of general agreement that this is a suitable next step for this action.
Welcome any comments from the panel. Go ahead.
Hearing none. So the next action, meet with independent telecommunications providers. What do we want to know? We want to know what's worked well, what hasn't worked well. Who did they work with to make it happen? And what will make the business case for building rural fiber? And we suggested that since Mike Andrews, committee member, has a connection, that Mike facilitate a connection between staff and the Independent Telecommunications Providers Association, and that staff follow up and request that they come and make a delegation, just as Berryfield has done today. So they provide more information to the committee and attend one of your meetings. And we have suggested that a suitable timeline for this would be at your 4th or 5th committee meeting. So we're currently at committee meeting number 3. So at your next meeting or the meeting after, we would try to arrange to have the ITPA attend. So again, Mr. Chairman, I would just ask that committee members provide feedback.
Go ahead if there is any. All right, carry on, Julie.
Just one question on that. Do we want to bring them in all together, or do we feel that they'll be more responsive if they're not presenting in front of their competitors?
This is the association though, right? It's not a number of providers. It's one representative from the association. Is that correct?
Yeah, actually, typically, if they're to agree to something like this, what I would expect is that they would have their executive director and then some representative members of the group, if they're willing. So I don't. There's a couple of cases, where these guys do compete with one another, but for the most part, they're pretty cooperative. In fact, some of them belong to a separate organization that is all cooperatives that work very closely together, but there's not a lot of competition between the members of this group. So I don't think that will be a problem. Ideally, what I think would be best would be to have the Jonathan Holmes, who's the executive director, and then a couple of his key members that are heavily involved in this, if in fact they're willing. But I can certainly reach out to him and find that out pretty quickly.
Great. Thank you, Mike. We'll follow up with you then to develop that connection. Any other thoughts about the action related to ITPA? Okay, we'll move on. The next action was to talk to other communities who have successfully implemented connectivity solutions. And we suggest that the follow-up action there is that once we've received the literature review, that this is the next logical step in our actions. So we will figure out who it is that has implemented some successful projects, and we'll follow up directly with those municipalities and try to identify best practices and on the flip side, any lessons learned. So we suspect this would take place anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks following the literature review, and that allows time for the analysis as well. And because it is COVID, and we're still very much in response mode across municipalities in Ontario, we've just noted that this would be, of course, dependent on community card availability and those the capacity within those municipalities. Any thoughts for that follow-up action?
Sounds good to me. Any comments?
Great. So the next action is really to gather existing data to support and inform the development of a connectivity strategy in Elgin. And it was suggested that we contact the following organizations to access their data. So Thames Valley District School Board, Jim and I both have a connection with Thames Valley, and we'll report back to the committee at meeting number 5. So again, this is meeting 3. And we were specifically looking into or asking for information to support how many students do not have access to internet at home, and whether there are any particular locations in Elgin County where students don't have access to the internet. Any comments on Thames Valley?
So Carolyn has said she'll get me some data next week, and then I may have some phone. So any issue with meeting at meeting number 5.
Super. Any other thoughts? Hearing none. SWIFT is another key source for the committee. And we had a discussion with Barry Field, and I think Barry's committed to being an ongoing resource for our committee and a source of information for you. So we've just noted that we're in regular contact with Barry and can anticipate that he'll be there for us as needed. Next one is current providers. We specifically want to know, what does connectivity look like in Elgin? Where have the current providers identified gaps and those hard to serve or underserved areas? And whether or not they'd be willing to have a one-on-one discussion with the committee chair. So this would involve a survey. The draft is to be completed by the committee, and the timeline would be meeting number 4. So we'll bring forward a draft survey for your review and for discussion and input at your next meeting. And we'll follow that up by sending out an email to current providers and asking for them to share information through the survey developed by this committee. So as a preliminary step, does that seem reasonable? Great. OMAFRA, are they aware of any areas that are not being served and where? So we'll rely on Jim Bunchu, our Director of Finance, to connect with OMAFRA and report back to the committee. once that information is available. We've suggested meeting number 5, but may have to adjust that. Okay, I'll keep moving on, just jump in if I start going too fast. The next one is the Chamber of Commerce. Alan Smith would have a close contact at the Chamber of Commerce, and Paul Jenkins, and as well the Aylmer Chamber of Commerce. So Alan will connect with both of those groups and report back to review any information that they have to support the committee's questions. And we're hoping again for a timeline of meeting 5. Public Health. So Catherine Thompson, who's on the call today, Supervisor of Legislative Services, will connect with Public Health, report back. Meeting 5, we'll try to consolidate all of this information into one report for committee members' review. Now, are we missing anyone from the key contact list? Okay, we'll move right into engaging stakeholders. So the action is to engage end users, and this would be businesses and homeowners. Some of the things that came up through committee discussion that you'd like to know more about included: where do you live? What kind of service do you have now? What is the speed? How much do you pay for it? And what do you actually need in order to either work remotely or for your child to learn remotely, those sorts of things. And what are you willing to contribute to the solution? So staff have actually developed a draft survey to engage end users. And following review of this action plan and the work plan, with the chairman's consent, we'll pass things over to Al Reitsma to review the survey and gather feedback from the committee. But we plan to distribute the survey online and have paper copies available through local municipal partners and Elgin's libraries. As well, we would promote this through social media, the county's website. We would request that our local municipal partners also cross-promote this. We would issue a press release and have some modest paid advertisements in our local media outlets to try to get as much information and as much interest in filling out this survey as possible. So subject to the committee's review of the survey following the action plan, we have identified the timeline for the launch of the survey as week 4. So we would launch that next week or in advance of your next meeting.
I think that sounds great. I think we may be amazed at some of the comments. I found out yesterday I have a neighbor who lives 2 roads north of me. She can actually see the water tower in Belmont. She's had 6, 7 people try to get her internet and can't. And, they're the forgotten people, trying to work from home, etc. But I'm really impressed by this. So carry on.
Great, thank you. There is one component of engaging end users that I'd like the committee's input on, and that is whether or not you think it would be helpful to host a virtual input session, and whether you had any ideas about what that might look like, or whether you'd like to table that until such time as you receive survey feedback and can assess the level of engagement across the community. Any thoughts on virtual input session?
Hi, it's Dominique. Can you hear me okay? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just thinking out loud here, I'm wondering if, it might be premature to plan that because their ability to engage, I'm thinking those who already have internet and don't have issues probably won't participate in the survey anyway. And so those who do have issues might have a barrier even to participate in a virtual session. So I'd be interested in looking at the first round of data before additional input, but I think it's a good idea, just to stage it first.
Great. Any other thoughts? Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. If you got a good set of snow tires and there's a big sale tomorrow, you're not going to be very interested. And if you don't have the ability to go anywhere, to get on the internet to participate, so yeah.
Good point. Mr. Chair, if I could, this may be getting too granular, but one of the concerns I have about this particular element of our work plan, and don't get me wrong, I think this is critically important. In fact, I think it's probably the most important building block that we're going to have as far as gathering this data. But I have concerns about validation of what we gather. And I can give the committee a quick example. I know the Connect to Innovate program, which I was involved with applying for some money in Elgin, which there wasn't much there offered, but Port Bruce as an example was identified in that because of input by constituents as an unserved area, completely unserved. And in fact, a lot of people may not particularly like their service provider or think that they have good internet, but it's fairly well served. And in my experience, a lot of times people will protest the service they have and indicate that it's very, very poor, when in fact it really isn't. And I think my concern there is that we really need to concentrate on the truly unserved and underserved people and not be sidelined too much by bad data. And maybe I make too big a deal of that, but I do have concerns about validation of the data once we gather it. I'm not sure how you overcome that. Pointing people, and I don't know what the survey looks like, but asking the public at large to give you what their speeds are. The vast majority of people will look at internet speeds in their home off their phone, which really aren't. It's their internal Wi-Fi services that they're looking at, which quite often are not a true representation of the kind of bandwidth they have. But I don't know whether anyone else on the committee is a little bit concerned of making sure that we start off with really, really good data and have a way or a means to validate the stuff that comes in.
I would tend to agree. Port Stanley, I get many comments, and people will gripe about their internet, and there's a lot of choice down there. And, compare that to people who have no choice and going without, they don't realize how good they have it. So I think you're right, Mike.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So a couple of things. So the questions that are there are not the actual survey. So I think we'll have a chance to look at the survey. And I think it's fine for people to even say, I don't know what my speed is. I think it's X, but maybe I don't know. We can provide the address where they can do a test. But the bottom line, we'll get to the questions. What do you need? I think people will be able to say, my speed is enough or not enough. So in other words, are they encountering barriers or not for the whole family, for the multiple uses and devices they have? And the other point is a triangulation that we'll get because public health and the school board, it sounds like they have collected similar information from a different angle. So I think by having multiple, by being able to compare multiple data sets, we should be able to validate to some extent. Ultimately, the perception is what I'm most interested in, because if people feel they're underserved, we need to address that. If it's not meeting their needs, whatever the speed is or whatever the cost is, the perception is the reality we have to deal with ultimately.
Further comments?
So again, I think we'll be able to design the survey in such a way that helps really gather the information that would be most helpful for the committee. So whether it's a perceived or real lack of services in the area, or whether it's just inaccessible to individuals because of cost, or whether they just don't know what exists in their community. Hopefully through the survey, we'll be able to gather that kind of soft data to support the hard data that we'll collect from some of our partners. So moving on, the next one is local municipal partners and engaging our lower tier municipalities. So the CAOs meet weekly, and I'll work through a strategy with them and report back to the connectivity committee. And I think we'll also rely on our county councillors to gather information from each of their respective municipalities in regard to each of the questions that are noted here. Okay, I'll keep going on. I'll keep moving forward unless I hear from anyone or see any hands raised. Connecting with neighboring municipalities. So for the municipality of Chatham-Kent, where we know that they've run some conduit under capital roads projects. Generally, the process here is warden to warden, and I would suggest IT manager to IT manager and engineer to engineer. So we'll use staff and the warden to gather information about what Chatham-Kent has done, how much it has cost, is it working well, are they using the conduit that they've installed, and what's the return on investment. And we've left neighboring municipalities wide open in case through the literature review we find that some of our other closest neighbors are involved in some of these projects that we could learn from. Infrastructure partners. So Elgin County's engineering services, our local municipal partners, utilities. We are committed to connecting with potential infrastructure partners and providing updates when available. Engineering services will look into some specific financial information about infrastructure opportunities, and that information could be gleaned from Chatham-Kent. And this one was kind of a hard one to come up with a definitive next step with a timeline, because I really think that this work is ongoing. So for both neighboring municipalities, those that have implemented great solutions, the dialogue will have to be ongoing. So Thames Valley District School Board, again, will gather existing data that they've collected through the pandemic about how many students don't have access to reliable or stable internet at home. Are there locations where students don't have access in the community beyond their household as well? What are the current costs of rural internet, and how do they prevent access? And what is Thames Valley willing to contribute to the solution? We could survey. We could include this in the survey as one option. We did not include it in the survey draft that we'll share with the committee next, but you should tuck that into your back pocket just as a consideration. So again, Jim will connect with Thames Valley, and we'll collect as much information as possible. For current internet providers and small providers, there's a long list of questions there, and the committee has yet to set a date for the connectivity committee, but we think the Internet Forum is a great opportunity to collect some of this information from our local providers. Again, we'll be surveying internet providers, and we'll conduct one-on-one. Well, the chairman will conduct one-on-one interviews with interested internet service providers, and that would be after we receive the survey results and the forum, so that the committee could review and provide input into what information it is that you'd like the chairman to ask of these current providers. Any thoughts on that one? I'm going to slow down on that one just in case we're missing any opportunities. Great. Swift. Again, we received a great update from Barry. We'll keep in touch with him. can ask him for information and resources as time goes on. So the committee's next action was to identify short-term solutions. And in order to do so, you have to know where the problem areas are and what the potential solutions are. And so we think we may be able to gather this data through information that already exists that we'll be compiling and presenting to the committee, as well through the feedback that we gather through the end user survey. Some solutions could be wireless point-to-point access, but we don't really want to predetermine what the solution is at this point in the absence of other information. So funding information, Barry provided a bit of a high-level overview of some of the sources of funding and funding programs. There are loans available through Infrastructure Ontario, and we'll have the Director of Finance, Jim Bunchu, come back to the committee with options and opportunities. Provincial government and federal government, so the warden, chairman, and CAO could meet with MPP Urick and our MP Karen Vecchio at our earliest opportunity in October to see whether there are additional funding opportunities that we are not aware of, and to strategize with them about how to pull together an application that might be successful, or that would best position us for success in achieving funding from senior levels of government. CRTC, I think it's important that we provide an overview of the program and available funding. So we'll endeavor to do that at a future meeting. And while we didn't identify which meeting, it's because our to-do list is quite long. So we'll try to balance it meeting 4 or meeting 5. The Canada Infrastructure Bank, again, will rely on our Director of Finance to report back with some options and opportunities. And for the role of the county, we have to think about what's missing. We'll have to seek County Council support for a Maid and Elgin solution for connectivity challenges. And the role of the county is to support the committee. So right now you'll see a lot of staff supporting the committee. So that's an interim step that the county is providing. And the county has essentially requested that the committee do an assessment of the current state of connectivity in Elgin County and come back to them with some solutions. So the risks associated with taking on all of this work, I have to mention COVID and staff capacity. So we're fully committed and we're able to do this as long as there isn't a catastrophic second wave where we have to make some significant changes to county services and really enhance our community response to COVID. Managing committee, public and stakeholder expectations will be important. And I think we'll manage this risk through clear communication and almost constant communication. There's a lot of curiosity that surrounds this committee and the work of this committee. There's a lot of interest. And I think we really have to prioritize what the committee is doing so that it manages community expectations and so that everyone feels like they're part of the solution. So they have the opportunity to attend and view live streamed meetings, have access to minutes, but also we will assess internally how we can promote the work of this committee and seek the support of current providers and the community to be engaged in the work of the committee. The other risk is public procurement processes. It's always important to manage expectations. Sometimes, we'll come up with a really great idea, but we have to follow all the right channels. We have to make sure that we've reviewed legal risk, we have a proper contract in place, and achieving council's consent could take more than one meeting. Those types of things the committee has to be prepared for. That will work as quickly and aggressively as possible, but there's still some risk of delay. And those were only risks that we could come up with. But if you can share any other opportunities for the role of the county or additional risks that the committee might face in coming up with a Maid and Elgin solution, we'd be happy to incorporate them into your work plan. And I'll pass things back to you, Mr. Chairman. That's the extent of what I wanted to review with the committee. And I thank everybody for their time.
Well, on behalf of the committee, I want to thank staff there's a lot of work in here. I'm excited, so anyone that would like to comment on this, now's your chance. You know, all the things we do with the county are important, but there is a lot of people out in the community looking for us to do this. Can almost sense the excitement, but the urgency too. So I'm very happy with where we're at after 3 meetings. So again, I want to thank staff for that hard work. Any comments? I think we're at the point to pick a date for our next meeting, Julie.
Mr. Chairman, there's a couple of other things that we should do. One, we still haven't received the minutes for the previous meeting.
Okay.
Just as a housekeeping item. And then with your consent, we'd like to review the draft community or end user survey. And I'd ask that Al Rietsma present that draft.
Go ahead, Al.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As mentioned, I'm going to present a draft of the internet survey that is for discussion purposes only. And we're seeking the committee's direct feedback on the questions and the design of the survey. So let me share my desktop. Hopefully everyone can see that. So the survey starts off with a preamble describing the purpose of the survey, that the internet connectivity is essential service for many residents and businesses in our community. The Elgin County Connectivity Committee recognizes the need to increase high-speed internet connectivity throughout Elgin County. Please complete the survey below to help us better understand your experience with internet service in the county. Here are the questions, some of the questions that we're proposing. In which Elgin County municipality do you reside? So they would pick their municipality. What is your address? And they're given the opportunity to enter their address, or they don't need to. And we have a note that this information will be kept in the strictest confidentiality and is for analysis purposes only. Third question is, who is your current internet service provider? We have a drop-down list that they can pick from, or they can indicate that they have a provider that's not on the list, and that list can be updated. Barry mentioned that he has a list of ISPs in Elgin, and we'll get that from him, and we can update that list based on what Barry provides us. We give them the respondent an opportunity to rate their experience with their current internet service provider based on affordability, the data allowance, so how many meg per month do they get or gig per month do they get of data, their reliability, their speed, and their overall satisfaction or dissatisfaction with their current service provider. Then we ask them for some comments. What is your current total monthly internet service? And we provide some ranges that they can choose from to indicate the type of internet activities they use on a daily basis, and they can check as many as they want, or enter something else that they use their internet for that we haven't thought about. What is the average number of connected devices you use? This is important to know that because it indicates the load that they put on their internet service. What challenges are they currently experiencing with their internet service provider. Free-form text, they can enter whatever they want here. You know, if they have a problem when it rains, they can put that in there or whatever they like. We asked them to complete an internet performance test that's provided by the Canadian Internet Registration Authority. We provide the link here, and I'm not going to walk through this whole internet performance test unless you'd like me to. I'll certainly do that. But basically, they put in their postal code, who's their ISP, and so forth, and then they run the test, and it'll record with Sierra the performance that they have, and it'll plot them on the map based on their postal code. And then we'll have obviously have access to that. The mapping information is free for anyone and accessible by anyone. Provide any optional comments that they have. Provide their email address, which is also optional in the case that we might want to reach back, or the committee might want to reach out to them for clarification on some of this information that they've provided. That's what we have so far, and I look forward to your comments and suggestions. Thank you.
Comments? Go ahead, Al. Just wonder if anyone wanted to suggest more things added or less, or comments.
There's also a paper-based component to the survey. Obviously, everybody doesn't have internet, and we've got some questions around those who don't. For example, have you tried to secure internet at your home? There'd be a yes or no. If you have tried to secure your internet at your home and were unable to do so, please explain why. For various reasons, and if other, please provide us with your contact information if you wish any information about internet connectivity in Elgin County. And then, of course, any other additional questions. Now I'm ready for feedback.
Comments from anyone?
Al, would it be too confusing, do you think, to suggest to people that the best speed connection can be achieved by using a hardwired device, or a device hardwired directly to your router, so we get good, clean data?
We can do that, yes, certainly.
Further comments?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I just think it's important to note that I have to do a little bit of research into the collection of personal information with respect to this survey, specifically just the requirements that we have and mandated obligations through the Municipal Freedom of Information Protection and Privacy Act. So we've asked some questions that we may not be able to ask, you know, like if please provide all of your contact information, or provide your specific address within the municipality. I just need to look into that a little bit further. So in just managing your expectations there, that we may have to adjust that according to what we are allowed to collect.
If I might, Julie, I know when Al and I talked via email regarding this suggestion I had, and it's just a suggestion. Street address works. I think it's a good idea. Most people can identify with that, but maybe even ask for a roll number. And I would argue, and again, you're the expert on this, but public information, I can see a 911 sign when I drive down a road. I can go into a municipal office and ask for a roll number on a property. It's all public information, but obviously you'll have to do due diligence to make sure that it's applicable in this situation.
Thanks for that, Cecil.
Mr. Chair, a couple of comments. Dominique?
Go ahead.
Thank you. Al, I'm wondering, in the section where you say who is your current internet provider, I'm wondering if we could have multiple entries. So I know in my case, I have to rely on a combination. So I would be good to, some people may have 3. And so if you could have multiple entries, and for each entry, I'm thinking out loud here, and I'm wondering if it's necessary to indicate what type. So is it wireless? Is it satellite? And I suppose if it's Xplornet, then you know it's satellite. But if it was Rogers, is it wireless or is it fiber? So I don't know if that could be an option to indicate. So which company and what type are you using? And so we might get some insights if people are having to use multiple. In the place where they do a speed test, did you actually have a, or did you want to have a box where they come back and enter the speed test, or is the point just for them to register and just provide additional? You see, like under 9, like, do you want them to come back and enter that speed?
That's a great idea. I hadn't thought of that. It's certainly a good idea to ask them to do that.
Another question was, I think we had discussed asking what they might be able to contribute to a solution. I think we talked about it could be as crazy as providing land, providing cash, providing further input, joining the committee. So I think we may need to provide a few examples to trigger like what could be a contribution to the solution, but I think I'd like to hear if anybody's willing to contribute something to the problem or to the solution. I'm also curious to hear about perhaps going back to the section on who is your provider now. I'm wondering if it would be valuable to have another section of what have you tried? And because I think the part of the narrative and the exasperation is that I've tried this, but I had to give up because, and then I tried this, and then I had to give up because, and then I tried that. So to me, I think that would provide more of the story that now I'm with Rogers, but that's only because of X. And I had to combine that with Xplornet, and I've given up on, Eastlink DSL because. So those are my thoughts. Happy to hear other feedback.
I have a comment, Justin.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Justin.
It seems very much geared to residences, and I wonder if we could maybe have an item or 2 on there for small businesses looking for better connectivity, or at least see if they represent a small business.
That's a really good point. I'm wondering if right off the bat, they could select, are you a residence or a business? And that might take them to 2 different links, just slightly different questions. Would that work?
Yes, that could be done.
Yes, I think that's a great idea too. Further comments? All right, I think they're good suggestions, Al.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Next steps, Julie.
So next steps, we'll polish up the survey, and we will post it, work with our local municipal partners on a distribution strategy. We will have paper copies available, and we'll seek support from committee members to help us promote, and through social media channels or any other outlets, whether it's through your business or your municipality that you help support getting as many responses to the survey as possible. And we'll have that ready in the next week or so, I suspect.
Okay, sounds good.
So just to circle back on timelines associated with the survey, how long would you like the survey to be open to the community for?
I guess before we go, we're going to be in the middle of October, aren't we? We certainly, well, open up for suggestions, but the shorter the better. Keep it moving. As we get into November and different weather and approaching Christmas, people may be thinking of other things. So I would think we'd want to do it fairly soon, but certainly anyone else jump in here and what's your thoughts?
Mr. Chair, I would think realistically, it's got to be at least 3 weeks, I would suggest. 2 weeks is way too short a timeline. So I would suggest 3 to 4 weeks is a long time, I know, and kind of works against us, but I would suggest 3 to 4 weeks. One other comment, I'm not sure whether this is practical. I'm kind of old fashioned in some respects. And I don't know what the cost of it would be, but is there a way that we could blanket through third-class mail an invitation for people to participate in the survey? Because I forget who made the comment earlier, but people that have no connectivity and people that are really old Luddites that don't have access to the internet period. Other people like Cheap Mike that doesn't even get a newspaper any longer. We may miss the very people that we're really trying to connect, and I wonder if an invitation through some kind of third-class mail that blankets the county is possible. We don't want to send the whole survey out, I realize, by mail. That's excessive.
What about advertising? I went to the mailbox this morning, got the Elgin County Market. I don't know how many still get that. You'll have some local newspapers. Thoughts?
We could certainly investigate that further. I know we generally were a little hesitant to do mass mailing because of the expense associated with it, but we could certainly find out what that would cost. Additionally, what we rely on is a partnership with our local municipal partners. So we try to align some of these initiatives to when our partners are issuing tax bills or water bills, and then we can stuff a survey or more information in with the mailings that they're doing. So we do that quite often at the county level, which is why one of our next steps is to connect with our partners and see what information they're sending out and whether we can piggyback on that. And we'd be happy to come back with more information about mass mailing across the county, or even, an advertisement through like a one-pager that's sent out with the Elgin County Market, if that's still distributed to all county residents. So we can, it was a great point, Mike, and we'll look into that further and report back to you. In the meantime, perhaps, oops, go ahead.
Sorry, Julie. One other thing, maybe we should be encouraging people within the survey itself to share it with their friends and their neighbors and people that they think may not have had the opportunity to see it.
I think we could, the elected people and our municipal staff, if we all handed it out to 5 or 6 of our neighbors, all of a sudden we're getting a lot of people covered.
Is that something that the Chamber of Commerce can help with? I'm thinking if paper copies could be in several businesses and everybody's got to go to the grocery store at some point, and one of them. So, and even at the post office itself, I don't know, and also the schools. So that's something that, that's another way of getting surveys into the house and through distribution at school. So I don't know what the rules are around that, or if we could partner with any of them.
Probably the Federation of Agriculture would be a good source as well. They have a good list, and they are rural. probably be good source of getting it out as well.
So essentially,
Further
that's the
comments?
list of the partners and the stakeholders that we're going to be approaching anyway. So as we're talking to them for their data, we could see if they can assist us with collecting additional end user stories and see what they can offer, and what they can contribute.
For sure.
We all want the same thing.
So if I may, Mr. Chairman, is it the committee's preference that we come back with a more clearly defined plan with some costs associated with some of these options for the committee's review and consent at the next meeting? Or is it the committee's preference that we go ahead and do a soft launch and bring a supplementary report to the committee at your next meeting? We're willing to do as the committee directs. It would just be helpful to know whether we should get it going or hold back and then formally launch it following your next meeting.
What's your thoughts?
My thoughts are time is of the essence, so I would start now. I wouldn't wait for that.
Yeah, Dominique's nodding. I certainly, you know, what we have there now, we're just going to tweak, revise a bit. So I think, yeah, I agree. Let's get going. It's not going to change a lot.
Great. So I'd recommend, based on some of the feedback that we've received, that we have a 3-week period, a window for the survey to be completed. And depending on how many responses we have at the 2.5-week mark, then we assess whether we do another blast. And we send it out again and say, we've just extended the timeline another 2 weeks. And then we really do some creative we employ some creative strategies to push this out and further market it to get a greater response rate. But again, we're open to suggestions.
I'm seeing heads nodding, so yes, I think carry on. Yep. If anyone disagrees, holler. No, I think you've got your answer.
Super.
Next steps, meeting date? Do we have a suggestion? Are we still gonna try 2 weeks, Julie, or what's your suggestion?
We're happy to accommodate the desire of the committee. So if it is a bi-weekly schedule, it's easy from our perspective if it's kind of a standing meeting and we can schedule a couple out in advance, we can plan accordingly. So that would be my only suggestion if we were able to do that. If not, we'll make alternate arrangements.
2 weeks from now would be October 22nd. Does that work for most, everyone? Same time, 1 o'clock? Okay. Again, we're seeing a lot of heads nodding, so let's go with that. I think this has been a great meeting. I'm very enthused, so. One last chance for further comments.
I just have one quick reminder that we still have to approve the minutes from the previous meeting.
Yes, okay.
I'll just add, Mr. Chair, that I really want to express my appreciation to staff and other committee members that we are keeping a very good pace. I realize it's tough, but we said right from the beginning that we want to treat this as an urgent matter, and I really, really appreciate the quick turnaround on everything so far. Thank you.
I totally agree. Staff have done a lot of work here, and it's appreciated. I guess I'm looking for a mover and seconder for the approval of the minutes.
I can move, Justin.
Thank you, Justin. Looks like Dominique wants to second it.
Sure.
Okay. Moved and seconded. Any discussion on or any errors on the minutes? Seeing none, we'll call the vote, please.
Counselor Marks,
Yes.
Counselor Jiguer,
Yes.
Justin Pennings,
Yes.
Mike Andrews,
Yes.
and Warden Manel is gone, correct? 4-0, the
I believe
motion
so.
is carried, sorry.
Thank you, thank you. I believe now we're at the point of adjournment, but I do once more want to thank everyone. I think we're down in the future, we're gonna look back, and this is a pretty exciting time, so. Again, staff, thank you for the committee, and I'm looking for a motion to adjourn. Which is something I generally like to do, but I can't. Moved by Mike. I do not believe we need a seconder, so I will declare the meeting adjourned. And thank you very much for participation, everyone. Have a good afternoon. Thank you.
Bye.